Welcome to You Are Intuitive, a series of refreshingly candid and grounded interviews about developing and using intuition in the real world. I am your host, Dana Mahacek, and today I'm thrilled to be speaking with Blaire Porter. Blaire's story begins in darkness, as the best ones always do. She had lost her job, apartment, and car within a matter of a week, and she was forced to pause and start examining how she was living her life compared to how she truly wanted to live it. After this week of loss, Blaire checked out emotionally. She didn't start to process what had happened in her life for about 6 months when she met with an intuitive healer. This marked the beginning of the rest of her life. Although the first year of healing was full of ups and downs, Blaire came out on the other side with clarity and intention. She was initially tapped on the shoulder by the divine to create Indigo Rain, a custom jewelry line based on chakra test results, and later in her journey, Blaire quickly discovered her own deep gifts as a psychic medium. Blaire now knows that we are all perfect exactly as we are and that we don't need fixing. She shows up in her work as her full and authentic self, giver, lover, intuitive, and healer. She honors her teachers, and I am so excited for you to hear her insights today. Thank you so much for being here, and please enjoy this conversation. All right. Hi, Blaire. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm so excited to talk to you about how you have developed your intuition and how you are using it today in your life. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. And the question that I often like to start with is kind of an obvious one, especially because the series is called You Are Intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself to be intuitive?
Yeah. That's usually how I refer to myself, just because I feel like if I had to explain, it would take me like 3 hours, and like people just, there's like a language thing. I prefer the word intuitive over psychic, but sometimes I have to use like psychic just so people can kind of understand. Because when I say intuitive, a lot of people don't know what that means. So
really, that's interesting, but they know what psychic means.
Yeah, so it's like, and the reason I don't like psychic is because I feel like you have to then be like, I'm not gonna like look into a crystal ball and some bullshit, like, I use that word when it's obvious there's no other word, but like, if I like meet someone in a coffee shop and they're like, what do you do? I'll just be like, I'm an intuitive, and whatever. And they'll be like, what's that? And I'm like, well, it's kind of like being a psychic. And they were like, oh, well, what are you sensing from me? That's why I don't like the word psychic. It's really is like, oh, you're getting good enough with me. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm not paying attention. I'm not supposed to pay attention like that.
Do you feel there is a difference between being intuitive and being psychic?
I don't know. I don't know if I've ever really thought of it quite like that. I just think that it's like, it's just I feel like that it's all, this comes from the same place. You know what I'm saying? It's all the same thing. I think it's how you just present yourself. I don't know. I don't know many people that like, I don't know, that would say that there's a distinction. I don't know if I would.
Well, and if there was a distinction, I feel personally, it would be this like really subtle difference. Rather than it being these two completely separate categories that are totally different from each other. But I do agree with you that the word psychic is a lot more loaded. It has like a lot more baggage than the word intuitive does. So I know for me personally too, I often will introduce myself as an intuitive rather than as a psychic, because I just don't feel like going there. And don't feel like unpacking all of that baggage in like a fleeting interaction.
Right. In the elevator. Like, yeah, let's get into this.
Totally. As the person's eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, I just fucking didn't want this to be awkward. Like, I didn't want a lesson in this right now. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Have you always felt intuitive then? Have you always considered yourself to be an intuitive person, or is that more of a recent thing for you?
I wouldn't have considered myself to be intuitive. Like, in hindsight, when I look back at like my life and like just like things that I knew and things that I could see, it's obvious to me, you know, like, wow, what was going on there? But I just thought that, I don't know. Maybe I thought it was like super deep or something. I don't know. Like, I think back to being a teenager and like really just like, I felt I often like I would really understand the undercurrents of people, and so I was getting into people's shit without realizing it constantly. And so now it's really easy for me to see, but back then I would have had no clue. Like, we didn't talk about that as a family. There wasn't really anything about intuition at all. So I don't really have an idea.
And what sort of, like, was there a defining moment then where you were like, oh, I actually am intuitive?
There was a couple. There was one that it was actually how Nash, my partner, and I met. I'm going to try to summarize the story real quick. Basically, like, we had talked online, and then we added each other on social media, and I was like, it looks like this person has a girlfriend. And I was like, I'm not about to get into some of this stuff. And for people who don't know, my partner is trans. So this was initially when he was a female. So, so I stopped responding. And for like 3 weeks, like, no, did not say anything. And then I was going out one night with my friends, and I was like, oh, I'm going to see her tonight. Like, I just knew that I was going to see her. And then we were out at this bar, and she walked in, and I was like, oh, hey. And it was interesting because at the time she lived in New Jersey and I lived in Brooklyn, and we were going to a bar in the city. She never really went out to bars. So it was kind of like, you know what I'm saying? It was like not just an easy coincidence. And I was like, oh, this is really weird. And then like afterward, I had a few more instances where I kind of like saw the future in a way. And I was like, okay. But at the time I was seeing an intuitive, and it was a really disempowering experience. Over time, it got more and more disempowering, but I felt great when I was there. And it did make me feel kind of like, you know, how you have to go through the Pope to get to God, right? Like, it was like she kind of held all of this for me, and like I wasn't allowed to touch it, or it wasn't me, like it was her, you know? And so it was kind of, there was a lot of things happening for me personally in terms of like development, but I didn't think that I was able. Yeah.
And there's so much I want to talk about that. But because I do feel, first of all, I do feel that everybody has these skills and these gifts and this capacity already in them. But I do also feel that a lot of people don't believe they have it, and believe that they need to either go through other people or like take these courses or like study these certain methodologies in order to have permission to access it, or like the ability or the capacity to actually do that for themselves. Was there, like, how did you realize that you could do it yourself, that it wasn't necessarily that you needed to have this intermediary to be intuitive or to have access to the intuitive realm?
I think it was, she had to take a break from work, and so I didn't see her for a couple of months, and I was like, wow, I feel a lot better. And then I started just getting feelings and lots of different synchronicities, and it was kind of like, okay, like I can trust myself with this. And then it just kind of developed. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, but just like having a break from her. Having a break from doing that work with her gave you clarity that, oh, maybe that work wasn't actually making you feel the best.
Yeah, for sure. Because it was like, the thing is, and like, I talk about this a lot now, is like, if someone's an intuitive, like, whether they're also like someone that you just talk to, like, that's kind of like what we do. It's like therapy in a way, but you shouldn't be seeing them once a week. And like, I did not know that, like, because I was so brand new, you know. So it was a disservice, I think, on her part to even agree to do that sort of work once a week, because it's like, you once a week and you get all these great messages and you're like, great, I feel so good. And then halfway through the week, you're like, now what do I do, or whatever. And so like, you know, after a year of that, it was really, really hard. And then when she took a break, it was like, wow, okay. Like, I feel a lot better. I feel like I can move forward, or I can do something, you know. And it was just, you know, she was like, you know, she's really, really talented. But just like, in hindsight, I'm kind of like, there should have been more considerations, I think, you know, like, or not agreeing to see people that often. You know, everything works out for the best, but you know, like, I'm happy that happened, because it's allowed me to kind of shape my own practice too.
For sure. And that's what I was gonna say about it too, is that like, having gone through that experience where, you know, you're spending time and you're spending money every week going to the same person, you've learned through direct experience not to do that for the people that you work with now, right?
Yeah.
And I know with my teachers, everyone that I've worked with, one of the things that I love and respect and admire about them the most was the fact that they were like, even before I felt ready, they were like, no, you're ready. Our work here is done. Like, see ya. I refuse to, like, I'm not going to take any more money from you. I'm not going to take any more time from you, because you've got this. You can do that yourself. So I love that, even though you had to experience it kind of the opposite way, now you do have that clarity when you are working with your own clients and building your own practice, that it's like, you know, this isn't going to be a once a week forever thing. If you want to connect with me, right?
Yeah. And that's why it's like, with like intuitive work, it's like, I've kind of, not that I've taken my focus off of that. I mean, I would say like, I see like clients who do just like the healing programs with me, but I'm not doing any intuitive work, and it's just a completely different setting. And I attract a different crowd too to that. So it's interesting, the differences. Yeah.
I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about, because I know a lot of the people who are going to be watching this or listening to this are maybe at a point where they haven't fully stepped into themselves as intuitive, or maybe they're worried about like, oh, I don't actually think I am intuitive, or maybe I'm not intuitive enough, or like, I see all these people who are doing these incredible things, but maybe it's too late for me, or like I missed the boat somehow. But I want to talk about your experience. Your first experience is kind of tapping into the mediumship, like actually being able to connect with spirits. Can you talk about like what that was like, when that was in your life, and kind of how suddenly it happened for you?
It was incredibly sudden. Like, I was not prepared. And I mainly because I didn't think that anything would happen. Right. So it's like I saw a medium a couple times in New Jersey when Nash and I lived there, and she's since become a really good friend. And she was like, I'm no longer doing readings for you. Like, we did one after Nash and I moved to Seattle, and she's like, I'm no longer doing this for you. She's like, I'll teach you how to do it, but this is so dumb. Basically, kind of like what your teacher said, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay. And I was just like, whatever. And I was excited about it, but I didn't think really anything would happen. And the very first day, like, we met on Skype, and like we just did a couple of like different psychic exercises, which were cool. And it's just like, all right, so now I want you to connect with somebody. And I was just like, wait, what?
How do I do that? Yeah.
Into this, and like, you want me to talk to someone? Like, are they here? It's just like, yeah, they're here, they're there. And I was like, all right. And it was so funny, just like how encouraging she is, because it's like every single thing I said, she was just like clapping and smiling, and you know, it was very encouraging. I was like, oh my God. But it was funny at that moment. I was like, oh, there's literally no denying this, you know. And it was very, very quick. And obviously it wasn't like right off the bat, I was like, I knew everything, you know, about this person or whatever. It was, my clairsenses really, really developed intensely through that process of kind of talking to different spirits. Cause it's different, you know, it's different than just like being intuitive in life, you know, it's like, you can say like, give that to me in a different way, you know? And so it's like, it's not like you're just like trying to get messages for this person, but you're kind of building, you know, like I don't know how to, you're building like a database too of what things that mean different things. And, you know, and some may like yell at you, you know, like, and my clairaudience will be like going off the hook. And then sometimes it's not like that way. So, but it was interesting how quickly that happened, and how it was just like, oh, okay. So like, I can do this now. Like, and it was just like, so ridiculous, you know, I wasn't expecting that.
Well, and especially because it's not like, from the sounds of it, that you weren't like, you know, from a young age, like, I want to be a psychic medium, or even thinking that that was necessarily a possibility for you. And that was when you were, what, mid-20s or?
Yeah, that was, I mean, the mediumship I started developing a couple of years ago. So like 26, I would say.
And before that, would you have like sort of actively excluded yourself from the possibility of being a medium? Like,
I think so, actually.
like that wouldn't have even been on the radar of possibility for you?
Right. Yeah, I think so. Because I was like, I was getting I got a couple of readings done from her and one from another person. And it was kind of, I don't know. It was just like, I always just felt like, yeah, they can do it and I can't, you know? And it's silly to even think that, because it's like, it's no different. Like if you're intuitive, you can do that. You know, it's really simple. Like, and I just, it's like we have this need to really overcomplicate things as a way to like disempower ourselves, I think, you know? Yeah. So, and I think that's why we go to these classes or whatever, because we need this paper, we need this certification that tells us, oh, we're allowed to do this now, or we are this way. And to me, it's almost the opposite, where it's like, I kind of like, it's like, I've gone to classes and they've been really great. But in terms of like how you said before, like methodologies and like doing this or whatever, and it's like, to me, it's the opposite. It's like you establish your intuition first and like your connection with spirit, and then they will tell you what it is that you like, you know what I'm saying? They will give you permission to go do this or to go do that. If that makes sense.
Or like, yeah, like little nudges to like what book you might want to read for like to gain certain knowledge, or to like learn different exercises or whatever, that it actually comes from being intuitive rather than like starting from the point of like, I need to learn all these things and then become intuitive. It's actually your intuition that tells you, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do this, or look into that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I remember like with that person that I was telling you about before, like I spent a year being like, I want to do this, I'm not sure how to do this, like over and over and over again, week in, week out. She probably took a break because of me, you know, like that's how
she's like, oh, Blaire again. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, but it was on the break where it was like, in like sitting with myself and my intuition, where I got very clear signs of where to go next. And literally a book was like on my coffee table. You want to talk about a book, like showing up, was on my coffee table after I had seen something. I had like it was the wisdom of the Enneagram. Like I read about it on Danielle Laporte's blog, and I took the quiz or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is cool, whatever. But I've been asking the spirit, like, please tell me like what it is I need to do to move forward. Right. And like, I take this quiz, I'm like, whatever. It's just, okay, it makes sense, whatever. And then I don't even think about it. I just keep asking, you know, because I don't think they've given me an answer. And then like 3 weeks later, the wisdom of the Enneagram showed up on our coffee table. Nash had bought it by himself, like all on his lonesome, right? I'm like staring at it like, what? And took me like 5 minutes.
How did this get here? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, where did this come from? And he was like, oh, I saw it on Instagram and I thought it looked interesting. I was like, so I opened it up to my type and it literally told me in like very plain English in the first paragraph, like what my fucking issue was. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, you've really been trying. And I've been the idiot, not paying attention.
Do you think, I want to talk about that though, like about being our own, like overcomplicating things, being the idiots, being the ones who are like blocking ourselves from things that are like already there.
I can't like, even, that's my life. And I know it's everyone else's too, so it's like it's a great universal factor. But
yeah, but for
I want to bash my head against the wall.
Yeah, and for people who are feeling like that now, like they're just like, why am I not getting answers, or like, why is this so confusing, or why is this so hard? Do you have any like practices that you do now to try to get out of your own way, or to not even try to get out of your own way because that overcomplicates it, to like actually get out of your own way? Are there things that help you now?
Definitely like being in nature, you know, and I have found, it's funny, I was thinking about this when I was like walking through the woods the other day, and I was like, I should be thinking all of these wonderful things right now. Like not even like, oh, life is wonderful, but just like I should be having insights. I should be thinking big thoughts. And I'm like, wait, no, like I'm literally not thinking anything. And that in itself is great. Like my mind was off. And I think that it's like, it was like, to me, I think I wrote a post about this the other day. It was just like, we have to give credit to the space where we think that nothing is happening, you know, and just be comfortable in that. Because it's kind of in that when you're sitting in that space where, to me, it's like the less I have resisted that, the more that has come through for me, you know, and, for like also like tapping in, I would say journey work has been really important for me. Because I'm not a huge meditator, but, doing journeys has been really, really powerful.
And by that, just for people who are watching and listening, do you mean like shamanic journeying, or? Yeah,
so I practice the northern traditions, so it's called scythe. So I usually journey to like those deities, right? So like Freya or Odin. And that my spiritual practice went in a whole different space when I got initiated into that. Things started clicking a lot more, and my integration has kind of gotten to another level. And they're very communicative. So I think that it's like, I had been kind of looking for, you know, that sort of thing for a long time, and it took a while, but yeah, it kind of went to another level. But so yeah, shamanic journeying, inside is a little bit different and uses song as a way of journeying out as opposed to a rattle or a drum. But it's been pretty effective. I find drums like really actually distracting for some reason. I don't know.
My partner is really big into drums, and for me, I find them just too overstimulating almost, that it's like, it's hard for me to settle in. Yeah, like to get in the zone when there's like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. The rattle is a little bit easier for me, but it's like I like the sound of drumming, but like if I'm going to journey, I'm probably not going to use a drum. But yeah, so that's been really important for me in terms of kind of maintaining my connection. And when I feel like stiff in a way, or like I'm getting caught up in bullshit or whatever, it's like, oh, okay, like go for a walk, or like listen to music or dance. Dance has been really important for me. And it's not like a time where I'm like, you know, like actively visioning or something, but it just like, it creates that space, you know, and a lot of times I'll do it before I journey.
I find that the cultivation of space in whichever way, you know, resonates with people the most, that for me has been the biggest factor in actually being able to be intuitive, or to be able to connect with my inner guidance, or connect with spirit. Having space and like intentionally cultivating that space has been major. And I find, because I'm oftentimes the type of person who will like, you know, I'm reading like 80 books at the same time. And I'm like, my schedule is always full and I'm like going from this thing to this thing to this thing. And even when I was like, one year, my like word of the year was ease, and I was going to cultivate more ease. But then to do that, I like crafted this like list of like, and then I'm going to like knit, and then I'm going to have a bubble bath, and then I'm going to like, but like the way I was trying to cultivate ease was not at all ease filled at all.
Right.
I was like,
for sure,
I have to like
you
go through these motions and tick all these boxes. And it wasn't until I was actually like, okay, I'm actually going to do nothing and have that be okay. And then it felt like, you know, insights and inspiration and ideas were actually able to get in. And it was almost like they were like, oh, finally, like we actually have like room to like inject ourselves into a very full psyche, right? Like, all they needed was just this like crack to get through, but I wasn't even giving them that before.
No, I hear you. And especially right now, because I feel like right now it's like I can't, it's like I physically, like I cannot move forward on certain things at all. And it's like I know that it's like they're just like, you need to just like sit in your practice and like just get to a space where like you have laid like a full-on foundation for it, because we're not moving forward without you unless like you read about that, you know. And it makes sense, because it's like for how much I'm kind of like changing my, you know, it's like when you have the intention of changing your work, they're like, okay, well, like let's look back on like what happened and like what did you do and what didn't you do and that sort of thing. So it makes sense, but
doesn't make it necessarily
no,
any easier, right? Like you're like, come on, I'm ready for the answers now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, humans are crazy.
We are, but in the best possible way. Okay?
Yeah.
Did you have any kind of, I guess, stereotypes about what it meant to be intuitive or what it meant to be psychic before you realized that you were intuitive and that you were psychic? What were some of the stereotypes that you had?
Well, I got into like the spiritual world, right? Like when I kind of started that journey, I was like, oh, I have to be wearing all white and I have to like really love the color pink or something. Like, I don't know, like really beautiful colors. And like, I have to like, just like glowing all the time, you know, and like the opposite of myself. Basically, like I have to be like this whole other thing. And it was just like, well, that's never going to happen. You know, it's just like, that's just not me whatsoever. It's like, you know, like about shadow work, you know? So it's like, I don't know. And so it's like, I even struggle with that now, is like when I tell people kind of what I do, I think they're kind of like expecting something totally different. Like they're not expecting me to be wearing like a flannel or whatever it is, you know? Like, they kind of look at me like, are you sure that's what you do? Yeah. So I think that it's like, even now it's not so much like stereotypes that were in my head, but just kind of like, it's more like me maybe like misinterpreting how other people expect, you know, intuitives or psychics or mediums to be, and me being like, well, I'm not that. Yeah. You know? Yeah. But then on Instagram, it's cool because it's like, there's a whole community and it's like, I'm like, oh, okay, they wear flannels too, right? Like, whatever. Totally.
Not everybody is in their Kundalini gown all the time, right?
Right. Or even owns one, you know? So exactly.
I don't own a Kundalini gown. No.
Yeah. I like, so I think it's just, I think that it's just kind of like a reality check for me sometimes. I'm just like, okay, like, you don't have to like look or be a certain way or talk a certain way in order to be this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So. Did you have any preconceptions around your ability to turn it off? Like, I know for me, when I was, I guess before I claimed myself as an intuitive, I felt really worried that like if I allowed myself to be sensitive or empathic or intuitive, that I would just be like nonstop bombarded by people's energy, and that I wouldn't have any control or discernment or boundaries around like what I could receive, how I could receive it, and when. Was that something that you also, I guess, worried about or wondered about, was your ability to control the flow of that?
I think for me, I think that the thing that has been the hardest for me is putting up boundaries for my physical body, right? Especially as someone who has a lot of digestive issues, it's the first thing to take a hit. And it's like I can't even really function when that happens. But what I did find is that when I started doing this work, my boundaries became a lot stronger without me intentionally doing anything, because I was like, oh, like, not to say like this is work, you know, like work, but it was very clear when I am in session, this is what I'm doing. When I am going to the coffee shop, I am not doing this.
Yes.
You know, and so it was kind of, it made it a little bit easier, because it's not like, I mean, and I've gotten a lot of lessons in boundaries anyway, in terms of like, yeah, you don't read people without their permission and stuff like that. But it wasn't even on my radar, you know, whereas before it was kind of like, if it seemed like someone was having a bad day, it's like I would want to talk to them and like hold space for them. And now I'm just kind of like,
yeah,
no, I'm like,
no thanks. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that it got a lot easier for me actually afterward. But sometimes I just kind of like throw myself into these things like recklessly, you know, I probably should have thought about it more at the time, honestly. But yeah.
Well, I was even thinking about when you were saying earlier, like if people are like, oh, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm an intuitive or I'm a psychic. And then you get that question of like, oh, well, what are you feeling about me? And then you realize just how prevalent that idea is, that like if you're psychic, you're always psychic all the time, and that there's like no stopping, like no boundaries and no stopping. But now when people ask me that, it actually takes me by surprise, because I'm like, nothing, right? Like I'm not reading you. I won't read you unless it's like in a certain capacity. But I just realized how much I had been worried about or believing that like if you were a real psychic, or if you were like a good psychic, that you would never ever be able to turn off that data and like have no escape from it.
Oh my God, how do they live? I don't know. Exactly.
I know.
I mean, like, because I try to explain to people, like, when I get that question, I say, like, I like, I'll spend like a couple of minutes if it seems like there's an opportunity, like if I'm getting to know someone or whatever, and like I'll just say, like, have you ever experienced like being around someone and just like not having a good feeling? They'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so that's your intuition, right? And like that's also your body reflects that to you. So yeah, you may get a stomach ache, you may get that, and like that is something that is harder to turn off, and it's an instinct thing, because it's what has allowed us to survive, right? Or that's how we evolved. So it's kind of like, and that's not necessarily even being empathic in a way, but it was like getting them to see that, oh yeah, I have those feelings too. And then also saying like, so those are the types of things that like would come through for me. But like for me to actively go retrieve information, it's like, yeah, I have to create that container.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise I'm just not interested in doing it.
Yeah. Well, and it's
not
work.
right to do, but
it's not right to do, and it's work.
Layers to it, and it's work. Yeah. So,
yeah. Have you found, just with your friends or family, that people treat you any differently now that you are like officially an intuitive, or that you've like come out as an intuitive?
My family kind of like ignores it. Like it's interesting. It's like, because like religion and spirituality was not a part of our life at all. So I think initially they thought it was like a phase, and then I think now it's like there's such a language gap that it's kind of like no one has ever asked me about my work, you know, and it's because it's like, you know, like whatever. And some, like, my dad made a joke last week about he's like, well, I'm the intuitive one in the family. So it was kind of funny, and also like somewhat of an acknowledgement, you know. It was like, yeah. Okay. But like, besides that, I haven't really found anything like that in terms of friends or family.
Mm-hmm. Were you worried about that at all, or
no,
or the type of
I
friends
don't
you
think
have, it's
so.
not like a big deal?
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, like pretty much all my friends now, it's like we're all the same. You know, it's like this is what we talk about pretty much constantly. So, no, yeah, with my friends, it wasn't a thing. I think about like people that I knew in college or whatever who like follow me on Instagram because I follow them, like people I played softball with or whatever, and I'm just kind of like, I wonder if they think that like I'm the biggest fraud in the world because like they knew me then, you know what I'm saying? Or they think that I'm just like full of shit, or they think that like she's crazy or something, like she's like gone off the deep end, because it's like I haven't always been like the most stable person in the world. And so it's funny because it's like like I said before, like it's such a marker, like that defining, like, oh, okay, this is it now, like this is my life now, and there really isn't any going back. And so I think about that before period, right? Like, so before intuition period, I guess you could call it, it's like when I meet those people or I see those people or I'm talking to those people, it's just such an interesting experience, because it's like I can't even put into words, like if we're gonna catch up, I can't, you know. And it's like, you know, it's interesting. So
like
with that,
a different world almost.
It's a totally different world, and it's a different language, and you know, so it's interesting. But yeah, I do wonder if sometimes I wonder, like, are they like rolling their eyes at me, or, you know, and that's really the only time I've ever like experienced that sort of like, I guess, thought process around that.
Yeah, I had something like, as far as a lack of a common language, when I kind of came out as an intuitive and started doing intuitive work, and I was trying to explain to my in-laws what I do, and my partner was like, I'm just going to let Dana explain it, because he didn't know the words for it. And when I was trying to explain it, and they're from Czech Republic, and I was like, oh, I'm an intuitive. And they're like a coach? I'm like, kind of. And they're like, oh, like a counselor? I'm like, not really, but kind of. Like a therapist? Are you a psychologist? And I was like a psychic, thinking that they would maybe know that word. And they're like, oh, so we settled on, I think we just settled on coach, because that was something that they could like sort of wrap their head around. But I'm like, it's not really what I do. But that's like close enough. That's the close enough word for it. Yeah.
It's interesting, kind of the language barriers. And I find myself in those situations where I'm like, I don't even have the right words. Like I really, like it's like, I don't know. I liken it to like the Matrix. It's like once you take the red pill, right? And I don't remember anything else about that movie, but I remember that moment. And it's like, I don't know. Yeah. It's hard sometimes.
Totally different worlds. Yeah. And so if people were wanting to, I guess, develop their own intuition more, or get in touch with their own inner guidance a little bit more, do you have specific practices that you would recommend to them? Or is the practice basically like check in with yourself and see what the next step is?
Well, most times, like when I talk to people about this, their biggest issue is trust. You know, it's like they'll be like, okay, I got all of this stuff or whatever. It's like I do a body journey with someone and they'll be like, okay, all of this came through, and it's like we're talking the entire time we're doing it, so it's like I know what's coming through. I'm taking notes. And then they'll be like, what did you get? And I'm like, this isn't about me. It's about you. And it's like you know what I'm getting, because I'm taking you to the place, you know, it's like that's why I'm guiding you, right? So it's kind of like I find that most people, it's like they'll get all of this wonderful information, but then they want to know like what I think of it or something, or like whoever
the validation.
The validation. And I think that validation is important, but at some point it's like you have to just like completely trust like what you're receiving by yourself. And
how do you do that? Like how would you recommend people
trust it.
Yeah, I was like, my grammar is going now, so like, how can people trust themselves?
It's hard, you know. It's like it's such a bit like vague concept in a way. Like, yeah, just trust it. And it's for me, it's kind of like, think of the moments that you really couldn't deny it, right? Like, so how I mentioned the moment like where I knew that I was going to see Nash that night, or the times where I've like seen the future or whatever. It's like I kind of hold on to those bigger moments, or I did at the time, you know, like I held on to those and being like, that just isn't nothing, you know. And it's kind of like just checking it, because it's like as you continue to go on, it's you don't necessarily need that anymore, but initially it's really like asking yourself like, could I have possibly made that up? Okay, no. All right, so go with that. And then I think that also there's something to be said for just like on the daily, like in the beginning, just being like, hey, send me a sign of this, or, you know, whatever, like, and just asking, because that builds that trust, you know, of like, okay, if I ask, like I'll receive or whatever.
Yeah. Just like building a friendship.
Totally.
Yeah. Like, there's a give and a take here.
Right. Exactly. Not one-sided.
Yeah.
So and then just like play and like doing different exercises and stuff like that. I think those are fun. And that's some of my favorite work to do, is like to teach people, like, it's, I basically do what my teacher does. I throw them to the wolves. So like, okay, like we're going to do this immediately. And they're like, wait, what? I don't have to read the book first. I'm like, nope. But just like kind of doing those little exercises, because it's so fun to just like watch their face being like, wait, really? I was right? And I'm like, yes, like great job. And
you get to be the clapper now.
Right. It's so fun. I get so like stoked about that. And I just get like so like proud, because it's like, it is that when you're watching that, you're just kind of like, holy shit, like everything is going to change for them now, because they know like, oh, this is a real thing, you know? So
that's totally changed my work too, is like, so after my teacher was like, pushed me and was like, okay, it's your turn to read me. And I was like, I don't know how. She's like, yeah, you do. But when I first started, I was like giving readings to people and like doing intuitive readings for people. And after a certain point, I was like, you know, this isn't my thing anymore. Like, what makes me excited and what totally lights me up is teaching people how to do that for themselves. And like being someone who can just be like a cheerleader for someone who's like, look at you, you're doing it, way to go. And like you say, that recognition, that like that moment when people are like, oh my God, I just did that. Like, that was me.
In the whole world. I can't.
It's golden, right? Like, that's what I want for the rest of my life, is to have just like a succession of other people's faces, like a highlight reel of other people's faces when they realize that they can do this, and that it's always been in them. It's always been there. That's so magical. Yeah,
it is so magical. I definitely agree. And I had that exact same experience of like, I don't really want to do this anymore, you know. Like I want to be able to like give people the tools and then launch them off, you know.
Totally.
And then just like getting to see them flourish is so cool.
I know, it's the greatest thing in the world. I'm like, cool. Now I know probably what all of the people who were a part of my teaching, now I know how they feel, being like, you go. You can do it. Woo. So then if people do want to work with you, or if they want to be able to follow you online, where's the best place for them to reach you?
Either through Instagram or my email. My Instagram is I am Blaire Porter, Blaire with an E. I don't know if that's going to be in a caption somewhere or something, but
I'll put it in the show notes for sure. Yeah, don't worry. I'll link to it.
And so you can like, they can send me a direct message there. Sometimes I'm not so great with direct messages or with emails. So like, I'm really working on getting better at it. So you can also send me an email, which you can find through my Instagram or my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experiences. And I just know it's going to be so helpful for people to know that, like, it's okay if you didn't come out of the womb being this like super
Psychic.
mega psychic. Yeah. That it is still possible to like you experienced, to just like one day all of a sudden you can connect with spirits, or one day all of a sudden some other gift or skill manifests itself. It's totally, that's normal.
And totally normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And totally possible, right? So I know that
Mhm.
everyone who's tuning into this, it'll just be like, whew, it's not
Thank
too
God.
late, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't miss the boat.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. So thank you again, Blaire, so much for
Of
being
course.
here.
Thank you.